InObscuria.
Welcome back, my friends, to the InObscuria podcast, a podcast where we exhume obscure rock and punk and metal, and we put them in one of three categories: the lost, the forgotten, or the should-have-beens. My name is Kevin Williams. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined by Mr. Robert Harrison.
I'm still here.
He's still here. We're both still here. We're both still 6 feet apart.
Hanging out.
Cool. We're still quarantined.
Healthy. No
Another
coughs.
week.
No fever. We checked fever before. No fever. Good.
And we both think that it's possible that when we were hacking up lungs back in February of 2020 when we were doing this, and we had so sexy voices.
Oh, God, it was awesome.
We think that we had the earliest version of the coronavirus.
We had it before the cool people had it.
It's a theory.
Before all the celebrities had it, all the athletes. No, we had it before they did.
We're pretty sure we had it, but it's just a theory at this point.
No
but who
confirmed
knows?
proof.
Hey, if you're out there listening and you have it, all seriousness, hope you get through it okay. Everybody stay safe out there. And, since you have a little more time at home, possibly, go listen to some of these podcasts that we dig, like The Dummy Room, Pod of Thunder, Decibel Geek, Podcast Rock City, Cobras and Fire, Growing Up Rock, The Lipstick Panel, Rock Strikes 10, The Pod Kissed, I Love It Loud Cast, The Synaptic Empire, Ages of Rock, and go check out the Metallica podcast called Metal Up Your Podcast. Also, come visit us at InObscuria.com. Give us a like, share us, recommend us, leave us notes, love messages. Oh, yeah.
Let us know you're there.
Let us know you're there on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're out there.
Or I'll give you Kevin's cell phone. Just call him. Any time of day. Just call him.
Sure. Why not? Everybody else does. So, Robert, anything going on with you these days? You just hanging out at the house?
Not a lot of parties recently.
No parties, no hot tub shenanigans.
I'm not going to say that, but I'm not going to, publicly announce that. But, there's been private shenanigans, not public shenanigans. Let's put it that way.
All right. Well, I'm just hanging at the house.
There was less than 10 people according to the government rules. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. All right. I don't have the life you have. I'm hanging at home with little kids and my wife, and yeah. We're having a good time, but I'm ready to get back out into the world, I got to tell you.
Yeah, I think everybody's starting to get a little edgy.
I hope this thing goes over soon. So, I did not reach out to any spirits. I did not get my Ouija board out this week, but I did have another fantastic dream.
Oh, a phantasmical dream.
A phantasmical dream. And I was visited by this groovy old spirit, but I don't remember
Jerry
who it was.
Garcia?
I don't know, man. I don't know, but we were walking in a field of mushrooms.
Oh.
And I was stepping on the mushrooms, and they were making these cool sounds. It was a very vivid dream.
Nice.
And I woke up at 4 a.m. again.
That's about the witching hour.
That's when it hits me. That's when they like to visit. And I get pissed off because then I can't go back to sleep. So my head starts to think about things. So I started to think about the weird-ass dream that I just had. And I'm thinking mushrooms and grooviness, and I'm like, we could talk about the 60s, but I don't really want to. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have another rock and punk and metal time capsule. But this time, we're only going to cover 1970 to 1975. And the reason is because I have so much obscure shit from the 70s that I couldn't possibly take a 10-year span and review all that stuff.
Very good chance I haven't heard it, too. That's way back in the Wayback Machine.
Yeah, this is the Wayback Machine. So we're digging deep to get this time capsule up. So this is truly going down to the vault. So we're going to dive into some things. There might be a few things that you're slightly familiar with, some names, but for the most part, I think it'll be surprising. So, we're going to start off with a little hard rock band from Hamburg, Germany, where most of them are from, right? Hamburg. So, this is a band that had a British singer. So, they were going to sing in English, and they were going to be set to take on the world. They actually did release 12 albums over the course of their career. They ended in 1981. They started in 1970. And here again, we've talked about this before, but there really is a lot to a band's name.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a crappy name, more than likely you're going to have a harder time getting to where you want to go as far as fame, fortune. Mm-hmm. So here's a band that started off, and they were really a contemporary with Black Sabbath. Their name sort of makes sense, but for 1970, I think they went a little too far. This band is called Lucifer's Friend.
Lucifer's neighbor down the street.
In 1970, Lucifer's friend. Yeah, I'm not sure
That was
why they didn't skyrocket to the top.
Yeah. Everybody had already heard of Black Sabbath and were ready for them when they heard Lucifer's friend.
Well, it's the same year.
All the preachers were like, nope, that's one more than we need.
So at least Black Sabbath can sort of get away with it. There's an old 50s movie, I think, or 60s movie called Black Sabbath. I don't think there was a movie called Lucifer's Friend.
No.
And pretty much Lucifer anything in 1970.
Yeah, it was still...
That was going to be a little tough to sell.
Yeah.
But obviously they sold. I mean, they stayed around until 1981. The other thing that killed them from having, I think, wide appeal, mainstream success, is the fact that almost every album they released of their 12 albums, they switched genres.
Oh, so they were looking for that niche.
They're musicians, man. They're just musicians. They're just filling it out. But they ranged anywhere from hard rock when they started going down the progressive rock path. They have a couple poppy albums. They have experimental jazz albums.
Oh, because that's what I always gravitate towards is
and
experimental jazz.
Yeah, that's where you go, And then by the time they ended in 81, they had come back around to sort of like a new wave of British heavy metal style because they were going back to their roots because all of a sudden there were all these bands who said, your first album kicked ass and it inspired us, so go back to that. And they did. Unfortunately, they ended. But anyway, I'm going to play something from their debut when they were truly contemporaries. They could have been Black Sabbath, but it just didn't work out for them. This is a song called Ride in the Sky, Lucifer's Friend, from their debut album, Lucifer's Friend, 1970.
Saying things I shouldn't say. You eyes
If you hadn't have told me that was 1970, I would have guessed 1980.
I agree.
Because the vocal style, I mean,
even the drum sounds.
The drum sound sounded much newer than 1970. The keyboard playing with the guitar back and forth definitely reminded me of like a Deep Purple.
Totally Deep
Richard
Purple.
Blackmore, back and forth, mimicking the leads and things like that. But
and Deep Purple was like they were beginning then.
Yeah, that was around the same time. They were more radio friendly as far as, well, we know what they did, but yeah, I could see if you put them side by side, they would play the Deep Purple on the radio, but this stuff sounded just as good.
It sounded really good. It's just if they would have stuck with what they were doing, then maybe they would have had some potential, and maybe they should have considered changing their name. But I could even hear like
El Amigo de Diablo.
I don't know, something. I could even hear like a little bit of Scorpions. Maybe it's that German thing.
Yeah, I think that had
like
a little
German
bit of a feel.
Yeah, so
it was very precise.
Yeah. It's really good, and it's a really good album. It's when you go beyond that album, you start to scratch your head a little bit. They have regrouped a couple of times, and they actually released a new album last year. So they're still sort of out there doing it. All right, I'm going to move in next. And you remember the 70s. I remember the 70s, especially a TV show. I used to watch a lot of these shows, and they'd be on reruns. And back in the day, you didn't have cable, so you'd watch whatever was on reruns. But Happy Days. You watch Happy Days?
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, dude.
A lot of Happy Days. You remember a character named Leather Tuscadero?
No, there's Pinky Tuscadero.
There was her sister, Leather Tuscadero.
No, I did. I remember Pinky Tuscadero. Yeah, I don't remember Leather Tuscadero.
So Leather Tuscadero was on a couple seasons, I believe, and she was a bass player. She wore like the leathers as well. Pinky wore pink.
Right.
Well, Leather wore black. That was actually an artist named Suzi Quatro. You ever heard of Suzi Quatro? Okay, so pretty cool. And what's really cool is I was going through all of my collection of 70s albums, especially in 70 to 75, a whole lot of glam rock. That's when the whole glam scene was getting going in England and, somewhat in America, but it sort of set up that whole explosion that would come 10 years later, But this was the groundbreaking thing to do, I guess, at that time. And Suzi Quatro she's the original badass American rocker girl. She was the first female pop star to be a bass player. To that point, any teen stars, especially women, were just singers. They didn't play music. They didn't play instruments. Well, when she comes on the scene, she's young and she plays bass. She's like this small girl, and she can just play the hell out of a bass. And she was really a pioneer. She also, if you'll see when we listen to the song, but this is proto-punk. It's like on the edge of the Ramones, yet at the same time it's glam. And a lot of glam rock kind of has that raw 50s style rock and roll that's brought into the 70s, right? So it kind of has a little bit of a punk.
Blues rock basics.
Yeah, so it's not it's very simple, basic, but just kind of raw. And she brought that, and there were no other females at the time doing this. So she's been awarded all of these different awards for being, the first female to do all of these things. And over the years, she's actually had 15 studio releases. I mean, this is somebody who, even though we're featuring her here on InObscuria, she's sold over 50 million records.
Really? Yeah. I've never heard. I mean, that's just me.
So most of her success, even though she's American and she was on Happy Days for that, brief 2-year stint, most of her success is in Australia, the UK, and Europe.
Okay.
And so that's really where she sold all of her albums for the most part. And her first album that came out in 1973, the actual year I was born, her first album is very Ramones-like, to me, very proto-punk. It set the stage for kind of garage rock, but it's done by this teenage girl, and it's just badass. I think you're going to dig this. And she's continued to record and perform, and she even released an album last year, but we want to check out something from her very first album that came out in 1973. This is called 48 Crash from Suzi Quatro.
And when you say it just so grand, there's a case
Maybe I'm being a little dense this evening. What exactly is a 48 crash?
Well, apparently I'm going to hit it in 2 years, and you've already passed
it. I'm thinking of like a 1948 car that crashed. Then I was thinking stock market. I'm like, was there a crash in 1948?
No,
I don't remember that.
I don't know.
A 48
I was
midlife crisis crash.
You know, I don't listen to the lyrics.
This
was sung by a teenager. I don't think she was talking about being 48.
No, I guess not.
But
I was just curious.
I don't know.
But yeah, all the things you said, the throwback to the 50s, that was just starting to be all the rage with American Graffiti, then Happy Days, and then Grease.
Yeah, it was a very glam rock thing too. Like embrace that simple beat, kind of the simple pop of the 50s, but make it 70s.
Yeah, it was before the metal kicked into the glam rock. It was just glam rock before it's glam metal.
Exactly, and it was, to me, it lends itself to punk more than it does to metal almost. Yeah. It's like the image became metal, but the music became more punk rock to me. And as you could tell, and I whispered it to you as this was starting, big influence on Joan Jett and the Runaways. When they started, they basically wanted to be 4 or 5 Suzi Quatros in a band, because Suzi was the only girl in her band. She was at the front playing bass and singing, but the rest of the band were guys. So the Runaways said, let's take that and make it all girls. So that kind of laid the foundation for the girl groups, if you will, from the 70s at least. Okay, next we're going to move into, I don't have a whole lot on this next band, but the name of this song is so 1970s, and I'm not even going to tell you what the name of the song is. We'll talk about it after we listen to it. But the name of the band is Copperhead. And if anybody out there is familiar with a band called Copperhead, there's been, I think, a couple bands. There was a southern rock band in the 90s called Copperhead. That's not who we're listening to. This is Copperhead from 1973. So let's listen to it and then we'll talk about it. But this is so 70s.
There are just not enough songs out there about roller derby.
A roller derby star. That is so 70s. I've ever heard.
Was roller derby big in this? I pictured it as the 50s.
No, man. In fact, in the 70s, roller derby, and I remember this, it wasn't just girls. There were guys teams as well.
I guess
in the 70s. And
where I grew up was just small enough we didn't know anything about that.
And I remember watching on TV, and that's exactly what he's talking about, watching roller derby on TV. And I remember it being on TV at my grandmother's house in rural North Carolina, and she only had black and white TV back then, and it was, the UHF or whatever, and you'd pick up kind of that fuzzy screen, and I remember watching these guys, these big dudes on roller skates, going in this little, it was like a wooden ring.
Oh, yeah. It had banked corners, like NASCAR.
And they were beating the crap out of each other.
It's like WWE on wheels.
Basically, and they would yell at each other, and they'd have, missing teeth. They look like hockey players. And maybe it was hockey players. Maybe that's
probably
what they did
recruited.
On the off-season.
Yeah, off-season.
But anyway, when I first heard this song, I was like, oh my God, this is the most 70s song I've ever heard.
I put that up there with Pac-Man Fever. As far as the novelty songs,
70s version of Pac-Man.
Yeah, because 10 years later you had Pac-Man Fever, and novelty, one hit wonder, whatever.
Yeah. So going back to who this band is, so this came out in '73. The band's name is Copperhead. Now they were formed after John Cipollina, if I'm saying his name right. He left the band called Quicksilver Messenger Service. Now they were a San Francisco psychedelic band from the late '60s.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, you've probably heard of them. Yeah. We don't know any of their music, but we've heard their name.
It was an advertisement somewhere.
Yeah, so they're a very '60s psychedelic band. So anyway, he leaves them in 1970. He forms this band Copperhead, and they get signed to a major deal. This album was on Columbia. Clive Davis signed them, and I think they thought this band was going to be huge. The debut just tanked. It failed to chart. They actually toured, and then they recorded a second album, and Clive said, sorry, their second album is still sitting in the vault somewhere. Never released.
Wow.
So anyway, Copperhead, not even a one-hit wonder, just a one album and done. One and done, but
they got to beat Clive Davis. That's cool.
But, it had enough recognition that all these years later, I discovered them through the internet and searching out bands that for a while, about 5 years ago, I went on this binge of searching the internet as much as I could to find as many obscure hard rock and rock acts from the 70s that I'd never heard, because I love classic rock. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, man, there's got to be more bands from that time period that just didn't get the distribution. There had to be as many bands as there are now, right?
We get beaten over the head with the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we get punished with the same damn songs in rotation on a classic rock channel, whatever classic rock channel that is, and there's so many more out there like you're finding.
Yeah, but the fun thing about the 60s and the 70s bands is by the time the 80s came around, if you were an obscure band or a regional act in the 80s, there were fanzines, there were magazines, there were things you could do to find these bands. And so you at least you read their name if you were kind of in the scene. For the 70s bands, there weren't things like that. So it was truly regional. If you knew about the band, you probably lived in the city they were from.
It's word of mouth. You knew a friend of yours that knew the bass player.
And so all these years later, to be a kind of a collector of music and to go back and try to be Indiana Jones of classic rock, this is where the fun is for me. And so that's how I found Copperhead. I would go down all these rabbit holes, and I found Copperhead. And there are a lot of other people that do the same thing I do, because a lot of these groups have either been released digitally now, or they're getting released now, or they had CD releases through the 90s and the 2000s. So anyway, this is one of those bands that I found that way. So moving on, not so much an obscure band, but, we have three categories here. So that last one was clearly in the lost. Nobody knew that one. This band people know, but I would put this band in the should have been. And this band should have had a crossover rock hit, and they never had one, and I never really understood why. And I'm talking about George Clinton's band Funkadelic. Now, Funkadelic was the sister band to Parliament. Mm-hmm. So in the 60s, George Clinton, who everybody knows is with James Brown, he's like the godfather of funk, right? In the 60s, he had a band called The Parliaments. And apparently there was some legal snafu with the label, and the Parliaments went away. It was kind of a doo-wop group. And when he came to the late 60s, George Clinton said, I want to take what Jimmy's doing, Jimi Hendrix, and what Sly and the Family Stone are doing and make it even funkier. And so he came up with the idea of Funkadelic. And then a couple of years later, he basically took the same band members and said, well, we're also going to be Parliament, not the Parliaments. Now he's just going to call it Parliament. And that's why people call it P-Funk or Parliament Funkadelic, because it was really kind of the same band, but they had two different approaches. Funkadelic was the hard rock, psychedelic side of funk. And then Parliament was the soul and dance side of funk. And so, they would release albums simultaneously, and they would go on tour as Parliament Funkadelic. And then they played both
Both sides
groups.
of the coin.
So anyway, in 1968, he starts with Funkadelic. They were pioneering. A couple episodes ago, or I don't remember how many episodes now, but we talked about funk rock. Well, this is really kind of where that started, along with Sly and, taking what James Brown had done. And at one point, George Clinton steals James Brown's band because he gets Bootsy Collins and some other guys. He gets the horns. So anyway, Funkadelic, though, they released albums up until the 80s, but they never had that crossover. So they were a big time touring band, but even though they were playing rock and they had this amazing guitarist named Eddie Hazel, they just never broke through on the rock side. And I never quite understood why. I think they should have. And speaking of Eddie Hazel, he's like a guitar god to a lot of people. But he actually, as I was doing some research, I didn't know this, he actually left the band in 1972. Now I'm going to play a song from 1974 where he came back. And his guitar work on this is amazing. But so he leaves in 1972 because of financial reasons. But then he gets into trouble. He assaults a stewardess and an air marshal while high on PCP, and he gets put in jail for a year.
Extended vacation.
And so then after that stint, he comes back and he makes this album called Standing on the Verge of Getting It On from 1974 Funkadelic. And this is the last time that he's an official member. He would play on other albums, but I actually thought Eddie Hazel was the guitarist all the way through, and I didn't realize that they had such a big cast of musicians. But anyway, they never had a crossover. I think everybody knows who P-Funk is, but I'm still going to play it because I want to.
Mama looking to the city, fancy dancers and big time spenders. She's been grooving. Red hot mama was getting
love how that can instantly change my entire mood. That's,
I know, right?
God, that's so good.
I could listen to that for another 30 minutes.
Oh, and I appreciate your explanation between the difference between Parliament and Funkadelic, because I knew there were differences. I didn't fully understand that until just now. That now I really want to go back and listen to and compare and contrast between the different sides of that coin, because that's
same
really
musicians,
yeah,
for the
same
most
guys, different songwriting, different whatever it was.
A little more horns, a little less guitar in Parliament.
Yeah,
it was more dance beat. I mean, that was in the pocket, but Parliament's like really in the pocket. It's more four on the floor kind of disco beat. But Funkadelic's more funky to me. And I gravitated, because of being a rock guy, I gravitated towards Funkadelic. I really got into them in college, and it was like discovering, when I was really getting into funk, and I'm like, how do I not know about this? It was from the 60s all the way through the 80s.
Yeah, it wasn't a brief shot in the dark. It
was like
it
a
happened
cult
for a long
band,
time. Yeah.
The song structure wise, maybe that's why they didn't have a crossover hit like on radio, but they could have done a radio edit of that song, and that could have, to me, I could hear that back to back with the ZZ Top song.
Well,
easily.
I mean, we talked about Mother's Finest in that episode, and they had their big crossover hit, and it was definitely more structured like a rock song, chorus, verse, chorus, solos, things like that. But I think they could have done that, but they just weren't thinking along those lines. They were just maybe making the music they loved and wherever it went.
They're like the funk version of a jam band, basically.
Yeah, that's true. And that's harder to fit into a genre of rock music.
And it fits really well into that cult thing. If you're into it, you're really into it.
Yeah.
And, I saw P-Funk in the 90s. I saw him in the 2000s. I mean, George Clinton has always been just amazing live, always playing festivals and things like that, and everybody's just dancing and having a good time.
Has he retired? I think there was a farewell tour.
Yeah, I think he is. I haven't heard of him touring in a while.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I think you're right. I mean, the guy's he's been around since the 50s.
He's been doing it a long time. He deserves a
He started
good
it with
retirement.
doo-wop and went all the way through. So, and his dreadlocks alone must weigh a ton. He's probably laying down right now.
He's got roadies that's what they're in charge of, is carrying his dreadlocks.
Yeah, so anyway, thought it was kind of fun to play. I like funk.
It's
I gotta play some funk, right?
Always welcome around here.
Okay. So being that we're talking about 1970 to 1975, we're going to hit on a couple more glam rock groups, because that was a big scene. And it was also, even though it was a big scene, I think most people only know a couple artists. David Bowie.
New York Dolls.
New York Dolls. That's the American one.
That's
that
American,
everybody
yeah.
knows. From England, you have David Bowie, obviously. T-Rex, Slade, Sweet.
Oh yeah, Sweet. How could I forget that?
That's about what most people know.
Yeah.
And there were tons of other groups and a lot of one-hit wonders. But then there was this band that I just totally dig when I discovered them. And they have a weird past. So they're kind of on the outside of glam, but they were lumped into the glam thing because of the way they dressed and the way they looked. And this is a band called the Sensational Alex Harvey Band. Ever heard of them?
No.
This is a cool story. So they're a glam rock band from Glasgow, Scotland. And the singer, his name is Alex Harvey, he was actually like an old dude in the band in the 70s. He was a guy that was in skiffle. You ever heard of skiffle music?
No.
So the Beatles started off as skiffle music. In the 50s and 60s, there was this thing going on in England called skiffle music, and it was basically anything you could play on to play this kind of almost like ragtime.
Ragtime.
Yeah, like ragtime.
Junkyard band.
Yeah, and so, people would play on washboards and tubs and all that sort of stuff. And that was skiffle music. So this guy was a skiffle musician in the 50s and 60s, and he even played a show with the Beatles when they were the backing band for this guy named Johnny Gentle. Alex Harvey actually opened for them, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So in 1972, after he's done his solo thing and he's done his skiffle music through the 60s, in 1972 he decides, I'm going to start a new group. And what he does is he takes a prog rock band, and the name of the prog rock band was a band called Tear Gas. I guess they were local in Glasgow, and he recruited these guys to be his band, and they become part of the glam rock scene. And so it's just like this weird juxtaposition of this guy who's, at that time, in the 70s, it wasn't really cool to be an old dude in a rock group. But,
has it ever been? I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's more, well, you see it more now, especially.
Well, because all the rock groups are old.
Anybody that's in rock is old, but,
yeah.
including
then, I
us.
guess it was hey.
But anyway, they became part of that glam rock scene. And the cool thing about them is if you go and look up any of their images on YouTube or go look up Google images of them, you're going to see this guy who's dressed like a mime. It's almost like he has Kiss makeup on, but he looks like a clown. And so the guitarist he had white face, he looked like a mime, and he wore like a green and yellow jumpsuit all the time. And then everybody kind of had their thing, but they didn't all really go together. Kiss, they did it right, right? They put it all together. They all looked like they should have been part of a band.
The Teletubbies all matched, and that's why they were successful.
Right. Well, not so much the Alex Harvey band. They had guys who had different looks. So anyway, they had a very specific look, but because of that, they became part of this whole scene. They have some great, great albums. They had 7 albums in the 70s. And they have a little bit of top 40 success, but mostly in the UK. And they never broke through in the US other than Cleveland, because Cleveland rocks. Rush broke in Cleveland. But some people know of them, but you're not going to hear them on the radio in the States. I think, maybe in England you would. But anyway, I want to play some Sensational Alex Harvey Band. So I'm going to play something from their debut album, which is called Framed. Came out in 1973, and this song is called Midnight Moses.
I think you and I both agreed while we were listening that was basically Bon Scott singing for Kiss.
Perfect.
Early Kiss.
Early,
very
it's
early
like
Kiss.
First two albums, Kiss, with Bon Scott singing. And by the way, he's drunk and he can't think of any words for the half of the lyrics.
Hey.
I love it. You listen to these, the first two albums, Framed and Next. They're just awesome to me. It's almost like, it's like Kiss and with Bon Scott, but also it's like a precursor to what's to come with punk rock, and eventually what's kind of the meld between punk and rock in the 80s. So anyway.
It was minimalist. I mean, a little silly. Some of the glam rock.
That's what it was.
What it was.
Silly.
It was a rebellion against some of the big arena rock at the same time that was going on. So they fit in with that.
Yeah, they were taking the piss out of everything that was supposed to be serious.
Exactly.
All right, well, we're going to stay in the glam rock genre, if you will, in the 70s. And in 1973, Bowie was really just starting to take off. And most of the glam rock bands at that time, as we mentioned, were from England, with the exception of the New York Dolls from New York. But to be honest, the New York Dolls never really had any major success. Most people didn't know them then. They know them now.
They influenced a lot of bands, and they're known because they influenced a lot of bands, not because they sold a lot of records.
Yeah, a lot of the punk rock bands in America would say that they were somewhat influenced by the New York Dolls and their attitude and what they were doing. But at the time, not that many people knew who they were. We're not talking about the New York Dolls, but we're talking about another American artist who is, this is a crazy story. All right. It's an artist named Jobriath. Have you ever heard of Jobriath? So you think this is a little artist I discover. They had basically set this guy up to be the next Bowie, but he's American, right? He's from New York. So he's an American glam rocker and actor. He's the first openly gay musician. In those days, you may have alluded to it like Bowie did.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't come out and say it.
No.
This guy, he was pride all the way through. I mean, it was just unheard of at the time. He began as a child prodigy. So this guy was a classical music prodigy. And he was also heavily into the theater, which, obviously is going to lend itself to become a glam rocker. Mm-hmm. Now, prior to that, he was in folk groups, and prior to being in these folk groups, apparently he was in the army for a little bit, and he went AWOL.
Oops.
So he starts touring as a musician in these folk groups in the late 60s and early 70s, and then the MPs catch up with him, and they put him in jail, but because he's gay, at that time, the way they dealt with gay people was they put them in psychiatric hospital. And so while he's in psychiatric hospital, he obviously has a breakdown and goes nuts. But he decides to alter his persona, and he writes all these songs. And he wasn't originally named Jobriath. He comes out of the psychiatric hospital, and he's now Jobriath. And he's starting to put demos out there, and he's starting to play with some groups. And eventually he ends up on, here's our buddy again, Clive Davis's desk. Now, Clive Davis passes on him because he thinks he's too out there. But a young David Geffen, who at that time is heading up Epic Records, he's not part of Geffen yet. He hasn't formed Geffen. He decides to sign this guy to a 2-album deal. And because he has so much faith in this guy and the craziness of his songs and where he's going and thinks he's going to be the next Bowie, he signs him to the biggest deal at that time in the 70s. I mean, it was like astronomical figures this guy was getting paid to sign with David Geffen at Epic and to do these 2 albums. And he's nobody. Nobody knows who he is. Well, this is where that 70s promotional, we're going to make everybody think you're the biggest thing in the world. There were several bands that started that way. And this guy so Jobriath, they make him look like this Greek god. They put these amazing posters and images of him, and even in Times Square. Like he has the whole ad on Times Square, the boards that are up, the lighted boards. They post his image up, and this is in 1973. So they go through all this promotional glitz and glam of the time to make this guy really appear like he's going to be something in L.A. and New York especially. And they're going to skyrocket this guy's career. And so he gets on, what was the 70s show, The Midnight Special. Mm-hmm. If you've ever seen some of those old 70s shows where they actually played live, they didn't do tracks, and they put all the bands on there. Where he was on Midnight Special, he did all the things that an artist would do at that time to get noticed. And he was a true contender for what David Bowie was doing, very similar. So they do an album, and the producer is Eddie Kramer, who happens to be, Mr. Produced Hendrix and Zeppelin, and soon after this would be Kiss. And they put out a first album. They put out a second album within 6 months in 1973. And the touring is strong. The promotion is working, but the albums tank. They don't sell. So he's doing great on touring because they've hyped it up so much, but the albums just tank. And after his 2-album deal, which is what he signed with Geffen, he's done.
I hope he made enough money to retire from there.
Well, it's kind of a sad story. So he doesn't. Right, so he doesn't get what he was ever owed, and he basically announces he's retiring in 1975. The guy only started in 73. He's retiring in 75, and he was the first rock star to die of AIDS in 1983.
Wow.
So it's a pretty tragic story, but what I found really interesting with this is how much hype in that 1 year that they put on this individual. Yet by the time you and I was born in 73, so by the time you and I are into rock music, we've never heard of this person.
No.
As much money as they sunk into this.
You can't force it sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can, but...
But I will say the albums are really strong, and the guy does play an amazing piano, and he's very eclectic. He's what you would expect from somebody who's kind of competing with David Bowie. He's out there, man. But he has some really cool stuff, and some of it's really rocking. And I'm going to play a song called World Without End. This is off of the first album, Jobriath. And you can find these digitally. But like I said, kind of a sad story, but kind of amazing that they would pump so much money into this and then for it to totally fail.
Yeah, I agree. That's good stuff. When you put it side by side with Bowie, it doesn't have what Bowie's got, but it's not bad. It just happened to be compared to David Bowie.
Exactly.
That's hard to be compared to.
Yeah. Maybe they were trying a little too hard.
Yeah. Maybe it should have gone off slightly different direction, but
yeah,
who knows?
But if you go look at the midnight special that he is on, you should check out what he's wearing. I wish you had your laptop here. I would have told you to go look at YouTube because he's wearing like this spaceman helmet when he walks out, and he's a real skinny dude. He's like really in shape, but he's really skinny, and he's in this like onesie, and he's got this spaceman globe on his head, and then before he starts singing, he, so eloquently puts his hand up and does it, and it pops out like a flower, like all these leaves. And now he's got this big collar around his neck, and he sings the song, and he's got this weird little dance. It's very Bowie-esque.
It had to be uncomfortable. All those things like that, the first thing I think of is, oh my God, that looks uncomfortable.
Well, that's what happens when you put a child prodigy classical musician who's also a theater buff into a rock band. But anyway, I would say go check it out, though. It's really cool stuff. It's a pretty tragic story. Jobriath. And which I think the lady who announced him on the Midnight Special said his name wrong, like Jobriath.
Just like I did.
But I think it's Jobriath. There's also a YouTube documentary out there about him, which is kind of where I learned a lot of this. Moving on, we're going to go from glam to proto-punk.
Yeah.
We're going to go to New York City, and we're going to go to a band that predates the Ramones by 1 year. And this band is called the Dictators. You ever heard of the Dictators?
Giggle. No.
No?
I have not.
All right. Well, Handsome Dick Manitoba is a singer of this band. Also the roadie.
I can empathize with that. I was also the roadie.
Yeah. And in 1975, they released their debut album called Go Girl Crazy. And these guys did not take themselves very seriously. They all had, kind of silly, fun names, and they were kind of your Welcome Back Carter, but musicians.
Yeah.
It's kind of what they were going for.
White fros.
Yeah,
and
big
mustaches.
big fros, and just, it was just 70s fun. And the first couple albums they did in the 70s were produced by Sandy Pearlman and Murray Krugman, which, if you're a Blue Oyster Cult fan, you know who that is. So all the Blue Oyster Cult albums from the 70s were produced by these same folks, and that was the Blue Oyster Cult management. Blue Oyster Cult, also a New York band. So anyway, that's kind of cool if you're a Blue Oyster Cult fan. So again, this predates the Ramones by a year. It's probably a little more rock than it is punk rock that, the Ramones would go on to do very well and establish that whole genre. But definitely this was a big influence on where the whole scene was headed. Over the last 45 years, these guys have released 8 albums. So they've been sporadic with their releases, but they've continued to exist over the years. And I'm going to play something from this first album, again, that came out in 1975, Go Girl Crazy. This is the Dictators with Master Race Rock.
Listen, you're picked to be my slave now.
Long hair, and they don't wear no underwear. Country rock is on the way. I don't want music, I want pay. Dictators can't swing, make you dance and sing. Cause no oil spill. You don't know us, but you will. We're the members of the master race. Got no style and we got no grace. Sleep all night, sleep all day. Nothing good on TV anyway. Gasoline shortage won't stop me now. Oh no. We've reached a higher spiritual plane that is so high I can't explain. We tell jokes to make you laugh. We play sports so we don't
I would actually say that this band is the template for every Swedish band from 1990 forward to today.
Swedish band?
Mm-hmm, yep, that sounds like every Swedish band I've ever heard since 1990.
I haven't heard that many Swedish
Yeah,
bands.
well, that needs to be another episode then.
I was going to say the Ramones completely stole the Let's Go from them.
Yeah,
that was not
a
original.
year before.
Yeah, a year before
they came out.
And I don't want to be blasphemous or anything. I don't want
No,
you to
man,
throw anything,
no.
but that little breakdown in the middle is very Rush-like.
Okay, sure.
Listen to the break when it gets to the guitar solo.
I'm with you. They were
Very Eric Slash.
They were like
Eric
almost too. So they had vocally, they were punk rock.
Oh,
all
absolutely,
the way.
absolutely.
Musically, they were a little too good.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
They-
Sell what punk would become at that time.
But when you play it chronologically into actual punk rock, you can start to hear, like you said, proto-punk, you hear those elements, the lyrics. And in this case, it'd be the lyrics. You would listen to these lyrics and hear the elements of punk rock very clearly in that.
Just snotty punks, you know? They just... they didn't
Smell
take-
your feet.
Yeah, they didn't take themselves seriously. I mean, as I was listening to it, I'm thinking, this actually sounds like a lot of the 90s pop punk bands who, you know, were just taking the piss out of making music, really. They just, everything was kind of a joke.
Yeah.
They didn't take anything seriously. And that's exactly what the Dictators were doing in 1975. So pretty impressive. A lot of people know this release, but yet most people don't own it. But a lot of people have heard of them. So a lot of punk bands will say, yes, we got what we do from the Dictators and the Ramones. So we mentioned earlier, a name means a lot when you're trying to be a band and gain some success and get played and be taken seriously, at least from a sales perspective. So why would you name your band Fuzzy Duck?
Smoking
Why would you
way
do that?
too much.
Why would you think
It has to be
that's a good idea?
drug-induced. Oh, yeah, that's a great name, man.
In 1971, it's another one and done, Fuzzy Duck.
You go back in time and just smack all of those bands upside the head. Dumbass,
Why?
no.
And the album's great, but you're named Fuzzy Duck. And I would tell you, if you had your laptop, go look up the album cover. You thought Orangutan was bad.
Oh, no.
Oh, man, Fuzzy Duck is really bad.
Where's
Go
my
look
phone?
it up. And the album is called Fuzzy Duck as well, 1971. This is a horrendous name, horrendous cover, but the music's pretty damn good. And the weird thing about this, it's mainly, you might call this a prog rock band, but to me it's just rock music. But the members were all from fairly prominent English prog rock bands. You had members from Andromeda, Crazy World of Arthur Brown, and Tucky Buzzard. These are all like B-list prog
Tucky
bands.
Buzzard.
Yeah, these are all like B-list prog bands in the 70s. And so members from all of those bands formed this band, Fuzzy Duck, in 1971. They got a deal, and they cut this album, and then they disbanded.
Wah, wah.
So one and done, yet this is a true cult classic because when they pressed this album, they only pressed 500 copies. And so over the last 50 years, people have sought out the
Very
original records. You know, this is a big collector's item, Fuzzy Duck. But of course, I don't have that. I got the digital version. But people are still talking about it, and it's actually pretty decent music. So I'm going to play some Fuzzy Duck. Did you look it up?
Yeah.
It's great, right?
Yeah. Is it the one them sitting around the control board?
No. Look at the
Oh,
cover. The
I
cover
thought that
is
was
actually
the
a
cover, sorry.
cartoon duck in like hippie clothes. It's like a cartoon.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, horrible.
What?
Horrible.
What?
Really bad.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so anyway, there's a lot to be said about image and name.
I hope they didn't get a tattoo of that cover because that would
I don't
not
know about
age
them,
well.
but I got one on my ass.
Yeah.
I don't see it. I don't feel it coming on. I don't taste it. But I know it's really strong. Can you hear it? It is firing inside. Can you feel it? It's only something deep inside. Breaking out.
like it, but yeah, I could see the name being a hindrance. And I see that a lot with jam bands. There seems to be some really silly names with jam bands more than just your average rock band. But
is that where you would classify this?
Yeah.
In today's standards?
Yeah,
probably?
by today's standards. Yeah. I mean, I don't know about the rest of their
It was like a Santana mixed with Moody Blues. I don't know. It was
good harmonies, good
little bit
guitar
of clapping
riffs.
guitar.
Yeah, and all that is all good. It was very jammy. It wasn't, I don't know, I wasn't really paying attention to music. And
it was blues bass.
Blues bass,
sure,
yeah.
And coming from a bunch of guys who were in prog rock bands, a little bit of a departure probably from what they were doing. But it's a really cool album. It does go a little bit longer. I mean, that song's 5 minutes. That was, I think, one of the shorter songs, which you would expect from a bunch of guys who play prog rock.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, cool. Just really stupid name. Why would you call yourself Fuzzy Duck? But
I guarantee somebody had one on their dashboard of their car, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that'd be."
I bet they thought it was.
Let's
funny.
go get in the Fuzzy Duck. Yeah, and once again, maybe after a few hits on the bong, that it sounds like, hey.
Of course, some people may say, "Why would you call your band Big Jack Pneumatic?"
Well, no, nobody's ever said that. Nobody's ever said that because there's a good explanation for that.
But I digress. All right, man. I have one more song for you, and I'm not going to announce who this is.
All right.
I want you to just close your eyes and listen. And when we get back, I want you to tell me who the singer is, okay?
All right.
All right,
Deal.
here we go.
Took off like a
All right, so Robert's been racking his brain.
I'm
Really?
going to hate myself. I'm
Really?
going to hate myself.
It didn't
when
just
tell
slap
me.
you in the face.
No, there's like 4 different ones that came to mind.
All right,
I mean,
so who do you have?
I picked up Elements of Bob Seger at first, and I was like, no, it's not
Wrong.
that. And then it was the guy from Mountain, Mississippi Queen.
Leslie West.
Yeah.
Wrong.
What else did I say? I said one more.
You said Bon Scott.
Bon Scott.
Now, you were really close there. Now, had this guy had a vocal that said, "Back in black,"
Oh, son of a bitch.
it was Brian Johnson.
I got thrown off by the earlier reference to Bon Scott. I had channeled Bon Scott. You're right. It was Brian.
So if you've never heard Brian Johnson's band prior to him joining AC/DC, this was Geordie. And Geordie were a British glam rock band. And Brian Johnson was the lead singer, and that was a song called "Give You Till Monday" from Hope You Like It from 1973.
Oh my God, that
And
was
Brian,
killing me.
yeah, Brian was in this band until 76, but they were on the glam rock scene and actually toured with Slade. They played shows with The Sweet, and they toured. Here's the big thing: they toured Australia extensively. So they spent a lot of time touring Australia. So you can see where the connection was made. And ultimately in, 1981?
80 or 80, yeah, I could remember 80 or 81.
You know, he replaced Bon Scott, right, after Bon died. So I was wondering, because I knew who it was, I could hear it right away.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
It was killing me.
Talk about somebody you hear every day
Yeah.
on the radio, right?
Well, I just went in a different, it just one.
But you were so close with the Bon Scott. You were so close. Yeah, so they actually, Geordie released 5 albums all the way until 1983. They tried to capitalize on when Brian got big with AC/DC, and they kept going and made a couple albums, I think, after he left in 76 and started doing solo stuff, but they tried to capitalize on the fact that their name was being known because he used to be in that band.
Yeah, every interview they got mentioned.
And,
former singer.
But the only thing they ever had as far as hits were just from the first album. They never had any hits after that. They had a couple like top 20, top 40 hits in the UK only, because that was the whole glam scene in 73. But anyway, I thought that was kind of fun to hear Brian Johnson. Most people don't know this stuff, so kind of cool. Well, that's what I have for you today, man.
Very nice.
70 to 75. So eventually we will get to 76 through 79 or 80. I don't know how to.
And the Swedish band you promised.
And we're going to do a Swedish episode at some point because, yeah.
You've got my curiosity piqued.
All right. Anything else from you?
That is it.
All right. Well, I'm going to play the outro. We're out of here.
See ya.
See ya.